15 years ago, my name was Lucas Almeida. I was 20 years old with no money, no job to lean on, and almost no reason left to believe I would ever become anything. I'd come to a small town in Pennsylvania because I heard a construction company was hiring an office assistant. I carried an old backpack, a few changes of clothes, a recommendation letter, and the naive hope that if I just worked hard enough, life would finally open a door for me. That door slammed shut before I even reached it. The position had already been filled. I spent the next 3 weeks knocking on every possible door in town. Diners, warehouses, gas stations, small hotels, auto repair shops. Everywhere I went, they shook their heads. My money ran out fast. The landlady at the cheap rooming house let me stay a few extra days out of pity, but I knew even kindness from poor people has its limits. By the end of the third week, I had less than $10 left. I couldn't even afford a bus ticket out of town. That afternoon, I sat on a bench in a small park in the middle of town. There was an old fountain, a few wooden benches, maple trees just starting to turn, and a couple of weekend stalls selling coffee, flowers, and baked goods. I sat on the farthest bench, backpack at my feet, elbows on my knees, staring at the ground. I wasn't crying. I was empty. That feeling was worse than crying because at least tears proved you still had something left to react with. I was thinking about leaving town, though I had nowhere to go. I was also thinking about giving up. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly disappearing from every expectation I had ever had for myself. That was when a girl's voice spoke in front of me. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you." I looked up. She stood a few steps away. About 16, brown hair tied back with a red ribbon, white apron with a little flower on it. In her hands was a paper cup of coffee and a slice of orange cake wrapped in parchment paper. She said, "You've been sitting here since my mom set up the stall. Normal people don't stare at the ground that long unless they're hungry or sad. I'm guessing you're both." I frowned, pride rising on instinct. "I don't need charity." She didn't get angry. She simply placed the coffee and the cake on the bench beside me. "I'm not bringing charity either. I'm bringing orange cake. Those are two completely different things." I looked at her. The calm way she spoke left me with nothing to say. In the end, I took the cake, not because I wanted help, but because my stomach hurt from hunger. She sat down at the far end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. "My name's Mariana Silva. My mom sells cakes at that stall over there." I followed where she pointed. A middle-aged woman was arranging pastries on a table covered with a red and white checkered cloth. "Lucas," I said. "Lucas Almeida." From that day on, I started coming back to the park. At first because I had nowhere else to go. Later because Mariana was there. She never spoke to me like I was a failure. She asked what I wanted to do, what I wanted to build, why I had chosen hospitality when I didn't even have a stable place to sleep. I told her about my dream. I wanted to build small but decent hotels, places where guests didn't just check in and leave, but felt treated like human beings. I wanted to open cafes that smelled like real butter and real coffee, filled with real voices, not cold luxury spaces made only for photos. When I said it out loud, even I thought the dream sounded ridiculous. A broke 20-year-old with $10 in his pocket talking about opening hotels. But Mariana didn't laugh. She said, "People who can clearly say what they want to build are usually the ones who end up building it. People who have already given up don't talk like that. They talk like they said goodbye to their dreams a long time ago." I looked at her for a long time. A 16-year-old girl helping her mother sell cakes, speaking to me with a certainty no adult had given me in years. In the days that followed, I kept returning to the park. I told myself it wasn't because I was asking for food, but the truth was I came back because Mariana was there. She gave me coffee when the stall had extra and slices of cake her mother called cutting mistakes, even though we both knew they weren't mistakes at all. In return, I helped her carry boxes, set up tables, and put away chairs. We talked about the future. She said she wanted to open her own small bakery one day. Nothing big, but a place with soul where every cake had a story. Then the last real chance appeared. An old acquaintance messaged me that a logistics company in Chicago was hiring an operations assistant. It wasn't a big job, but it was a real one. They needed someone to interview within the next 3 days. If I got it, I could start over. But I needed money for the bus ticket, a temporary place to stay, and food for the first few days. About $700 in total. I didn't have it. I told Mariana one Saturday afternoon, trying to sound casual. Maybe that chance wasn't meant for me, I said. I'll probably just keep looking for work around here. Mariana stayed quiet. She had a strange kind of silence, like she was doing math in her head, not with money, but with fate. The next morning, she came to the park earlier than usual. In her hands was a white envelope. She held it out to me. There's $700 in here. I froze. Mariana, no. It's the money I saved for 4 months. No, absolutely not. What were you going to use it for? She looked toward her mother's stall. To buy a new stand mixer. Mom's old one keeps cutting out, but the old one can still be fixed. Your chance might not wait. I stood there, not daring to touch the envelope. I can't take money from a 16-year-old girl. She looked straight at me and said, very seriously, then don't take it as money from a 16-year-old girl. Take it as one person's belief in another. Then she gave me one more thing. A small piece of paper torn from a school notebook. On it, written in blue pen, were 6 simple words. Go far. I believe in you. I read the sentence over and over. My throat tightened. I said, one day I'll come back. I'll pay you back. I'll thank you properly. Mariana smiled. Her smile always came before her words, as if the kindness inside her moved faster than her voice. I know, now go. You have a life to start. I left town on the Monday morning bus. Mariana didn't come to the station. We said goodbye under the maple tree in the park. I carried my old backpack, $700, a slice of orange cake her mother had wrapped for me, and that small piece of paper with 6 words. That night I slipped it into my wallet. I didn't know then that the note would stay in my wallet for the next 15 years. And I didn't know that the girl who gave it to me would become the name I searched for the longest in my life. 15 years can turn a broke 20-year-old into someone the newspapers call a self-made man. But I knew the truth was never that clean. I wasn't entirely self-made. I had been saved by a 16-year-old girl, a paper cup of coffee, a slice of orange cake, and $700 she should have used to buy a new stand mixer for her mother. I reached Chicago and got the operations assistant job. I worked like someone terrified of being thrown back into the dark. I arrived earliest, left latest, learned everything from accounting to warehouse operations, from customer service to negotiating with suppliers. Later, I moved into hospitality, bought a failing motel, and turned it into something clean, warm, with free coffee and staff who remembered guest names. That motel made money. I opened a second one, then my first cafe, then my first boutique hotel. By the time I was 35, I was the owner of Almeida Hospitality, a group of boutique hotels and cafes operating across Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and New York. People called me a millionaire. They said I had vision. They said I understood guest experience better than many bigger competitors. But no one knew that everything had started from the feeling of being truly seen by someone who asked, "What do you want to build?" For 15 years, I looked for Mariana. I went back to that small town. The bakery stall in the park was gone. Locals said the mother and daughter had left years ago. Some remembered the name Mariana, others only remembered the girl with the red ribbon who sold orange cakes. I hired private investigators 3 different times. I searched through small business records, school files, vendor permits, and social media. But the name Mariana Silva wasn't rare. Every time I thought I had found her, it turned out to be someone else. Once I drove more than 3 hours to a farmer's market because I saw a photo of a stall with a red and white checkered cloth. When I got there, the woman selling cakes was a stranger. I kept that small piece of paper in my wallet the entire time. It had become so worn that the creases were almost tearing. I wrapped it in a thin layer of plastic, but I still carried it with me. On difficult days, before walking into an important meeting, I would open my wallet and read those 6 words. Go far. I believe in you. I had gone far, but I still hadn't found the person who told me to go. My mother, Helena, was the only one who knew the full story. She still lived in a small town in Pennsylvania and refused to move into any of the houses or apartments I bought for her. She said old tree roots don't like being moved. Every time I came over for dinner, she would ask, "Are you still looking for that girl?" I usually answered vaguely, "I'm just doing market research for new locations." She never believed me, but she never pushed either. She only looked at me the way a mother looks at a son who carries a debt that money can never repay. Inside the company, the person who understood my schedule best was Vanessa Monroe, the marketing director. Vanessa was sharp, professional, and almost intimidatingly competent. She had helped Almeida Hospitality expand the brand and turn every new hotel opening into a media event. She had worked with me for 4 years, and I knew she had feelings for me even though she never said it directly. I respected her and trusted her abilities, but there was a locked part of my heart. I didn't know if I was still waiting for Mariana or simply waiting for a chance to properly thank a memory. Then Almeida Hospitality decided to open a new hotel in Maple Falls, a growing town in Pennsylvania. It had an old downtown, a small park, brick-paved streets, and family-run shops that still used hand-painted signs. I chose the location for its weekend tourism potential. But the moment I stepped into town, I felt something strange. Not a clear memory, just the smell of autumn leaves, the sound of shop doorbells, and the way sunlight fell across old windows. It felt like I had stood somewhere near here a very long time ago. I didn't know Mariana was living in Maple Falls. After her mother passed away, she had taken over a small bakery called Mari's Sweets. It wasn't large, just a few tables, warm cream-colored walls, glass cases filled with tarts, cupcakes, cookies, and orange cakes, and an old stand mixer that had been repaired many times. The bakery wasn't rich. Some months, it barely covered rent and suppliers, but Mariana kept the place clean and kind, filled with the real smell of butter, oranges, and coffee. Local customers loved her because she remembered what they liked, asked how they were doing, and always saved a slice for the old mailman on rainy days. We were living in the same town without knowing it. Fate brought her back into my life through something very ordinary. The new hotel was preparing for its opening party. The New York dessert supplier canceled at the last minute because their refrigerated truck broke down on the highway. The events team panicked. We only had 48 hours. A local staff member suggested, "There's a small bakery in town called Mari's Sweets. Not as fancy as the old vendor, but the cakes are really good." I nodded without paying attention to the name. Mariana accepted the last-minute order. She worked almost without sleep for 2 days. Lemon tarts, mini chocolate cakes, butter cookies, vanilla cupcakes, and, out of some unexplainable habit, added several trays of orange cakes using her mother's old recipe. On opening night, I walked past the dessert table and picked up a slice of orange cake. The moment I bit into it, I stopped. The smell of orange, the taste of butter, the slightly runny glaze, the moist texture, all of it pulled me back to a wooden bench in a park 15 years ago. The feeling wasn't a clear memory. It was more like a door quietly opening inside my chest. I asked the events manager, "Who made this cake?" "The owner of Mari's Sweets, sir, Mariana Silva." I heard the name. My heart skipped once, but my mind immediately pulled back. Mariana Silva was a common name. I had been wrong too many times before. I didn't dare to hope again. I said, "I want to meet her." When she stepped out from the side kitchen, hands still dusted with flour, hair tied with a deep red ribbon, I looked at her. A woman around 30, mature, calm, with deeper eyes and a face that no longer belonged to the 16-year-old girl in my memory. I did not recognize her. I truly did not recognize her. But she recognized me immediately. She just didn't say anything. I held out my hand. "Lucas Almeida, your cake is very special." She shook my hand. Her voice was steady. "Thank you. It's a family recipe." I said, almost without thinking, "It tastes like a memory." She looked at me. There was a small wave in her eyes, but she hid it quickly. "Good cake is cake that has a story inside," she replied. I stood completely still. That sentence. I had heard a version of it a very long time ago, but the memory moved too fast for me to catch. I only looked at her and felt that the woman in front of me carried something familiar in a way that made me uncomfortable, like a song I had heard as a child but had forgotten the lyrics to. That night, Mariana left the hotel without telling me the truth. She could have said it right then. I'm the girl who gave you $700 15 years ago. But she didn't want gratitude to decide everything between us. She wanted to know if, without that 15-year debt standing between us, I would still see the person she had become. Whether I could love Mariana at 31, the owner of a small, struggling bakery, and not just worship the 16-year-old girl who had once saved a broken young man. So she kept the secret. And I, the man who had spent 15 years searching for her, began to fall in love with her as if she were a complete stranger. The morning after the opening, I walked to Mari's Sweets before going to the hotel. I told myself I was only checking on the local supplier and thanking her for saving the event. But when I stood in front of the glass door and smelled butter, coffee, and warm orange, I knew I was lying to myself. Mariana was behind the counter, carefully decorating a small cake. She looked up when the bell above the door rang. "Good morning," she said. "Would you like to order more cakes for the hotel?" "No, just a coffee, if you have it." "We do. Sit anywhere you like." I chose the table near the window. She brought the coffee and placed a small slice of orange cake beside it. "I didn't order cake. This one was cut uneven. It can't be sold." I looked at the perfectly sliced piece on the plate. Where exactly is it uneven? In the baker's pride. I laughed. The sound surprised me. It had been a long time since I laughed that easily with someone I had just met. I came back the next morning, and the morning after that. At first it was only coffee. Then it became conversations. Mariana didn't talk like the people in my world. She didn't try to impress me, didn't flatter me, and never asked about money or press coverage. She asked simple, difficult questions. "What part of the hotel makes you feel proudest?" she asked one morning. I started talking about design, service standards, and operational systems. She shook her head gently. "No, I mean the part that makes it feel like it has a soul." The question left me quiet for a long time. Very few people had ever asked me about the soul of what I built. Most only asked about occupancy rates, average daily rate, and profit margins. I told her about the cafes inside my hotels, how staff were trained to remember returning guests' names, and how we tried to work with local bakers instead of using frozen products whenever possible. I told her that when I was 20, I had once been hungry in a park and a single slice of cake had made me believe people could still be kind. Mariana listened. She didn't tell me she was the girl in that story. She only asked, "Did you ever find her?" I put my hand on my wallet but didn't open it. "I've been looking for 15 years. To pay her back?" At first, I thought that was the reason. Later, I understood that money is the easiest thing to return. I want her to know she wasn't wrong to believe in me. Mariana looked down at her coffee. After a moment, she said softly, "Maybe she already knows." I didn't understand why her voice sounded sad. Those mornings slowly became a habit. I arrived around 8. I always sat at the same table near the window. Some days we talked about business. Some days she told me about her mother and the recipes she had left behind. Especially the orange cake and the belief that good cake is cake that has a story inside. Other days we simply sat in comfortable silence while she worked behind the counter and I opened my laptop. The sound of the espresso machine and the quiet rhythm of a knife-cutting cake filled the space between us. I began to notice the difficulties the bakery was facing. The old freezer made strange noises. The spice shelf was loose. Suppliers had raised the price of flour and chocolate. Mariana never complained. She simply reduced the number of expensive items and replaced them with cheaper ingredients. Her quiet dignity made it impossible for me to offer direct help, so I helped in other ways. I started ordering cakes for internal meetings at the hotel. I introduced Mari's Sweets to the local business association. I added her name to the hotel's list of approved vendors. When a partner asked where to order desserts for a conference, I recommended her. I never told her what I was doing. I didn't want her to feel like she was receiving charity. But she noticed anyway. One morning, beside my usual coffee and orange cake, there was a small folded note. Thank you for the things you think I don't see. I read the sentence twice. The handwriting slanted slightly to the right, steady and soft at the same time. A strange feeling moved through me. The handwriting looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I had seen it before. That night, I slipped the note into my wallet, next to the old piece of paper from 15 years ago, still not realizing the two handwritings were the same. The feeling between us grew slowly, but it was clear. One rainy afternoon, I walked into the bakery and found the spice shelf had collapsed, jars of cinnamon broken across the floor. Mariana told me not to come in because of the glass. I came in anyway and started picking up the larger pieces. You don't have to do this, she said. I know. She went very still. I didn't understand then why those two words made her look at me for so long. Only later did I learn that 15 years ago she had said almost the same thing when she handed me the envelope. We cleaned the floor together, then sat side by side at the counter watching the rain fall against the glass. I asked her, "And are you happy here?" She thought for a long time before answering. The bakery gives me meaning. This town gives me roots. Happiness is more complicated than that. What are you still missing? She looked out at the rain. Sometimes I just want someone who will come before the storm. Not to protect me like I'm weak. Just to sit beside me until the rain passes. I didn't say anything, but I knew in that moment I wanted to be that person. Vanessa noticed the change in me before I even named it. She saw me going to the bakery every morning. She heard me mention Mariana in conversations that had nothing to do with work. She watched the way I looked toward the center of town from the hotel windows. One afternoon she came to Mari's suites alone. Mariana told me later that Vanessa was very polite, but every sentence felt like a blade wrapped in velvet. Vanessa said, "Lucas is a very busy man. His world is much larger than this town. Sometimes his attention can make people misunderstand." Mariana only replied, "Would you like more coffee, or are you ready to leave?" The question made Vanessa angry, but Mariana showed nothing. After that, Vanessa began digging. She collected scattered pieces of information. The bakery had once owed suppliers. Mariana had once sent a business proposal to one of Almeida Hospitality's branches years ago and been rejected by the system. Revenue had increased after I appeared, and several new customers were coming from the hotel. All of it was true, but Vanessa twisted the pieces into a different story. That Mariana had deliberately approached me to save her failing bakery, using charm and a hard luck story to take advantage of me. When Vanessa placed the file on my desk, I made the biggest mistake of all. I didn't ask Mariana. I trusted the cold silence of papers more than the eyes of the woman who had looked at me with truth for weeks. I didn't get angry. I simply withdrew. That was the crueler thing to do. I still came to the bakery, but I spoke less. I still drank the coffee, but I didn't stay long. I still looked at Mariana, but I avoided her eyes. She noticed immediately. One morning she placed the coffee in front of me and asked quietly, "Is something wrong?" I looked at the cup. No, just work. It was a cowardly lie. Mariana didn't push. She only nodded and returned to the counter. Her calm acceptance hurt me more than if she had demanded an explanation, because a part of me wanted her to defend herself even though I hadn't accused her yet. I wanted her to break the distance I had created, but Mariana was no longer the girl who gave trust for free at 16. At 31, she no longer wanted to beg anyone to believe in her. The charity event for the new hotel was held on Friday night. It was meant to raise funds for local vocational training programs. Business owners, local journalists, city council members, and the entire Almeida hospitality team were there. Mariana had been hired to provide all the desserts. She arrived early and arranged everything herself. Lemon tarts, chocolate mini cakes, butter cookies, vanilla cupcakes, and, following a habit she couldn't explain, placed several trays of orange cakes right in the center of the table. I wasn't there at the beginning. I had flown to Detroit to sign a contract and wasn't expected back until the next morning. Vanessa was in charge of the event. Around 9 o'clock, Vanessa stepped onto the stage to give a speech. She began with the usual beautiful words about kindness, opportunity, and social responsibility. Then her tone changed. "We all want to believe in touching stories," Vanessa said. "But sometimes, behind those stories is calculation. There are people who see a large company, a successful man, an opportunity to gain something, and then wrap themselves in a pitiful appearance to step inside. The entire room went silent. Mariana was standing beside the dessert table. She understood immediately. Vanessa never said her name. She didn't need to. She spoke about a small bakery that once owed suppliers, someone who had once tried to approach the company, and someone whose revenue suddenly increased after becoming close with the hotel's leadership. Every sentence was vague enough to avoid a lawsuit, but clear enough that every pair of eyes slowly turned toward Mariana. People began whispering. Some looked at her with pity, others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The room had turned into a circle of judgment. Mariana didn't argue, she didn't cry, she didn't explain. She simply placed the tray she was holding onto the table, took off her gloves, picked up her bag, lifted her head, and walked out. She didn't rush. She didn't lower her gaze. She gave Vanessa no satisfaction of seeing her break. She left the event with every ounce of her dignity still intact. A young staff member named Raphael had recorded the end of Vanessa's speech on his phone. Not out of curiosity, but because he felt what was happening was wrong and wanted proof. I returned to the hotel late Sunday night. Raphael sent me the video. I watched it once, then a second time, then a third. Every time I reached the part where Mariana put down the tray and walked out of the room with her head held high, the shame inside me grew heavier. Not only because I hadn't been there to protect her, but because I had done almost the same thing Vanessa did. I had judged her in silence based on pieces of paper I never verified, without giving her a chance to speak. I called Vanessa at nearly 2 in the morning. Explain the video. She stayed quiet for a few seconds. I was only protecting the company. No, you humiliated someone in front of a room full of people. Lucas, didn't you see? She approached you for her own benefit. Tomorrow morning, I want every single piece of information you gave me to be reviewed by legal. Every single one. The next morning, I went through everything Vanessa had collected. It only took one session for the entire story to fall apart. Mariana's old email was a normal business proposal she had sent to several companies years ago. It had simply been filtered out by the system. The bakery's debt was old debt that Mariana had been paying off little by little on her own. The increase in revenue wasn't because she was using me. It was because the new hotel had brought more visitors to town, and because I had quietly introduced her to people. Every conversation Vanessa had used had been taken out of context. Vanessa hadn't completely invented anything. She had done something more dangerous. She had used fragments of truth to build a complete lie. I went straight to Mari's suites. The door was closed. The lights were off. The tables and chairs inside had been neatly stacked. I knocked, but no one answered. An older woman from the shop next door told me Mariana had stopped by yesterday, returned the keys, and said she would be leaving town in 3 days to take a job at a larger bakery in Boston. I felt something drop inside my chest. I drove back to the hotel and began checking every document Vanessa had given me. By late morning, the truth was completely clear. I called an emergency meeting with the board. Vanessa was removed from all projects and later asked to leave the company. I didn't make a public spectacle of punishing her. I had never enjoyed humiliating people, even those who had humiliated others. But the consequences were real, clear, and irreversible. Still, dealing with Vanessa didn't bring Mariana back. I called her. She didn't answer. I texted. No reply. I went to the bakery again. Empty. I asked her friends. All they knew was that she was planning to take the night bus to Boston on Wednesday. Before going to the bus station, I drove to my mother's house. I needed to tell her everything. Maybe because she was the only person who knew how long I had been searching for the girl from years ago. Maybe because deep down I felt that everything was finally connecting to the past, but one final piece was still missing. My mother listened quietly as I told her about Mariana, the bakery, the orange cakes, the line, "Good cake is cake that has a story inside," the red ribbon, and the thank you note with the slanted handwriting. When I mentioned the red ribbon, she suddenly stood up. She went into her bedroom and opened an old shoebox she kept on the top shelf of her closet. Inside were old photos, letters, and small things she had saved from the years when I was still poor. She took out a faded photograph. I kept this from when you first sent it home after you started working in Chicago, she said. I took the photo. It showed me at 20, thin, wearing an old jacket, backpack on my shoulder. Next to me was the bakery stall in the park with its red and white checkered cloth. Mariana's mother stood behind the counter. And at the edge of the frame, a 16-year-old girl with a red ribbon in her hair was smiling. I looked at the girl in the photograph. Then I thought of Mariana's face. The world seemed to stop. With shaking hands, I took out my wallet. I opened the innermost compartment and removed the 15-year-old note. Go far. I believe in you. I placed the note beside the old photograph. The handwriting was exactly the same as the note Mariana had left under my slice of orange cake a few weeks ago. My legs gave out. I sat down on the chair, covered my mouth with my hand, and cried. I, the man who had stood in front of investors worth hundreds of millions without shaking, was now crying like the 20-year-old boy I used to be. I had searched for Mariana for 15 years. She had been standing right in front of me. She had looked at me every morning, made coffee for me, listened to me, and let me fall in love with her as if she were a stranger. And I had not recognized her. My mother placed her hand on my shoulder. Go find her, Lucas. I stood up immediately. The bus station in Maple Falls had a bus leaving for Boston at 8 o'clock that night. When I arrived, the clock showed 7:48, and I saw her. Mariana was standing in the boarding line, backpack on her shoulder, a small suitcase beside her. Her hair was down. She wasn't wearing the red ribbon. For some reason, the absence of that ribbon hurt like I had just lost her all over again. I called out, Mariana. Mariana turned around. She wasn't shocked, not completely. It was as if one part of her had been waiting for this moment, while another part had already prepared to leave if I didn't come. I walked toward her, holding the old photograph and the 15-year-old note in my hands. My fingers were still shaking. I gave both to her without saying a word. She took the photograph first. The moment she saw herself at 16, standing beside her mother's stall with the red ribbon in her hair, her eyes filled with tears. Then I placed the small, worn piece of paper on top of the photo. I've kept it, I said, for 15 years. It's been in my wallet every single day. Mariana looked at the 6 words. Tears fell, but she didn't wipe them away. I knew who you were from the opening night, she said quietly. I nodded. The pain in my chest made it hard to breathe. Then why didn't you tell me? She looked at me. There were no more secrets between us now, because I didn't want you to come to me out of gratitude. I didn't want you to see me as the girl who gave you $700 15 years ago. I wanted to know if, without that past standing between us, you would still see me. The 31-year-old woman who owns a small bakery, who has debts she's still paying off, who has pride, who has fears, and who has her own dreams. I wanted to know if you could love me for who I am now. I'd looked at her, and the regret was almost unbearable. I do, I said. I love the woman who makes coffee for me every morning, the one who remembers what her customers like, the one who refuses to lower herself just to fight back when someone tries to humiliate her, the one who walked out of that room with her head held high. And I also love the 16-year-old girl who saved me, but not because of the debt, because both of them are you. She closed her eyes. More tears fell. I continued, I'm sorry I didn't recognize you, but what I regret even more is that I didn't believe you when Vanessa gave me those papers. I forgot the very first lesson you taught me, to look at a person with trust before looking at them with fear. Mariana glanced toward the bus that was now boarding. The driver was calling for final passengers. I was going to leave, she said. Not because I don't love you, but because I didn't want to stay in a place where people thought I had to prove I wasn't cheap. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. She looked back at me. And you? I held the note out to her. I already had my answer 15 years ago. I just took too long to understand that the person who wrote it was standing right in front of me. A small laugh escaped through her tears. You really searched for me all these years? Private investigators, farmers markets, small towns, old business directories, social media. I once drove 3 hours because I saw a stall with a red and white checkered cloth. You're an idiot. Yeah, I said, but a persistent one. She laughed again, then cried harder. I stepped closer but stopped before touching her. Can I hold you? Mariana looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and walked into my arms. We held each other in the middle of the small bus station, surrounded by the sound of the departure announcement, rolling suitcases, and people walking past. 15 years quietly closed inside that embrace. No more explanations were needed. The bus to Boston pulled away without her on it. 3 weeks later, I held a proper reopening event for the cafe inside the Maple Falls Hotel. This time, I didn't keep the story quiet. In front of the staff, partners, and townspeople, I showed the old photograph on a large screen. I said, when people look at me, they see a successful businessman. But everything I have today began on a day when I was hungry, hopeless, and a 16-year-old girl brought me a cup of coffee, a slice of orange cake, and every dollar she had saved. When the whole world saw me as a failure, she looked at me like someone who still had a future. I looked at Mariana sitting in the front row. She didn't save me with money, she saved me with belief. And sometimes having just one person believe in you is enough to keep you from giving up. I didn't propose that day. I didn't want to turn the moment into a performance. I simply made the truth public, apologized to Mariana in front of everyone for letting her be hurt, and thanked her, openly, for changing my life 15 years ago. After that, our love grew slowly but steadily. I never asked her to close the bakery and step into my world. Instead, I helped her expand Mari's Sweets in the way she wanted. Still handmade, still filled with the real smell of butter and oranges, still a place where people felt like they were coming home. She also stepped into my company, but not as Lucas Almeida's woman. She became an advisor for the bakery section across all our cafes, gently reminding me that no matter how big a brand became, it should never lose the small soul it started with. 6 months later, we opened a free vocational training center in Maple Falls for teenagers from difficult backgrounds, unemployed adults, and anyone who needed a second chance. We taught baking, coffee making, small hotel operations, basic financial management, and interview skills. The name of the program was simple: One Slice of Cake. On the main wall of the center, we hung the old photograph in a light wooden frame. Below it was a single line: a small act of kindness can change an entire life. As for the 15-year-old note, Mariana refused to let me keep carrying it in my wallet anymore. She said it had already endured enough sweat, time, and stubbornness from me. We preserved it between 2 sheets of protective glass and placed it in the office at the center. The 6 words were still there, slightly faded but still readable. Go far. I believe in you. One afternoon I asked her, if you could go back to when you were 16, would you still give me the $700? She looked at me and smiled. Yes. Even knowing it would take me 15 years to recognize you? I would have added a 7th sentence. What would it say? She tilted her head, her eyes both teasing and gentle. Look more carefully. I laughed and pulled her into my arms. And I understood then that our story was never just about a successful man finding the person who once saved him. It was about kindness that doesn't disappear after it's given. It travels far, grows, circles through years and cities and mistakes, and one day returns in the form of a small bakery, a slice of orange cake, a woman who has grown, and an old note that still has the power to make a man cry. I had gone far. But in the end, every road still led me back to the first person who believed I could.